The wind rolled across the barren plains like a whisper from the dead, carrying with it the smell of dust, sagebrush and old blood, the kind of scent that belonged to a land where violence was stitched into the very soil. And it was in that same breathless desert silence that Samuel Hartley rode toward his inheritance, a cabin left to him by an uncle he barely knew, but whose reputation had been told to him in warnings rather than memories. For they said Elijah Hartley had lived hard, died harder, and left behind more ghosts than cattle. And now that Samuel had claimed his uncle's land, he was about to discover that the ghosts were not just whispers but shadows still, hanging from the rafters, waiting for him. Samuel was not a hardened outlaw nor a gunslinger by trade, but a rancher's son from Texas, built with broad shoulders and calloused hands, carrying the kind of grit that came from years of sun and work. Yet he carried inside him a hunger, a sense that fate had pointed him to this cabin for reasons far deeper than cattle or soil. And as his horse trotted the last mile through the gulch, his eyes caught the outline of the cabin on the rise, a dark silhouette against the fading sky, leaning slightly as though the land itself wished to swallow it whole. The first thing he noticed was the silence, deeper than any silence he had known. No bird song, no rustle of wind through trees, just a heavy stillness that pressed on his chest like an unseen weight. And Samuel knew then that his uncle's cabin was not just a place, it was a curse. He dismounted, boots sinking into the dry dust as he tied his reins to the old post, and when he stepped to the porch, the boards groaned beneath his weight like a warning, and his hand lingered near the revolver on his hip, not from habit but from instinct, as though every inch of the place begged him to be ready. The door creaked when he pushed it open, the smell of mildew, whiskey, and death drifting into his nostrils, and there in the dim light of dusk spilling through broken shutters. His eyes froze upon the horror. From the main rafter of the cabin, a rope hung loose, and at the end of it, swaying gently as though caught in a breeze no man could feel, was the body of a young Apache girl, her black hair tangled, her skin pale against the darkness, her bare feet hovering inches above the floorboards. For a moment Samuel couldn't move, couldn't breathe, his heart slamming in his chest as the sight rooted him to the spot. And though every instinct told him to run, to leave this cursed cabin behind and ride until he forgot the sight, something within him, some old Hartley, stubbornness or perhaps a whisper of the girl's spirit, held him firm, and instead of running he stepped forward, his boots echoing, on the wooden floor as he reached out with trembling hands and cut her down. She was light, too light for a girl who must have once been full of life, and as her body crumpled against him, he realized she was not cold. Stone dead, not yet, for a faint gasp escaped her lips, ragged and desperate, and her chest rose in the shallowest breath. Samuel dropped to his knees, cradling her head as he pressed his ear close, his heart leaping with the fire of sudden purpose. This girl had been meant to die here, meant to be forgotten as some savage warning or curse left in his uncle's dark wake. But Samuel Hartley would not let her spirit fade tonight, not if he could help it. He laid her down on the worn rug, cutting the rope from her neck, rubbing her wrists, forcing air into her lungs the way he had seen ranch hands. Revived drowning boys pulled from rivers, and slowly, painfully, her breaths came sharper, more real, until her eyes fluttered open, eyes as dark and endless as the desert night, filled with both terror and disbelief. And she looked at him as though trying to understand why he was here, why he had pulled her from death. "You're safe now," Samuel whispered, though he knew the words were hollow in a land where no one was truly safe. But it was all he could give her, and in that moment he swore he would uncover who had done this, why his uncle's cabin carried such death, and what curse had tied her fate to his. Outside the night was falling quick, and with it came the howls of coyotes, the creak of distant wood, and the unmistakable sound of horses on the ridge, riders approaching. And Samuel knew then that saving the girl was only the beginning of a story darker than he could have ever imagined. Before I take you deeper into this deadly western tale of curses, vengeance and mercy, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what comes next will chill your blood and pull you deeper into the most powerful, Wild West story you've ever heard. The sound of hooves thundered closer, a rhythm that echoed across the barren ridge like war drums calling to the dead. And Samuel Hartley's blood ran cold as he realized that whoever had left the Apache girl hanging inside the cabin might be returning to finish what they had started. For the West was a place where loose ends were tied in blood, and no one left witnesses alive. He grabbed his revolver from the table, checked the chambers with trembling fingers, and glanced down at the girl whose breath had steadied, but whose frail body still carried the raw bruises of the rope, her eyes half open as though she wanted to speak, but feared the air itself. And Samuel leaned close, whispering, "Stay quiet. Whatever happens, stay down." His boots pressed against the floorboards, silently as he moved toward the door, the stench of mildew and blood hanging heavy in the air. And just as he peered through the broken shutters, he saw them, 3 riders, their outlines cut sharp against the silver light of the rising moon, dust trailing from their horses, rifles slung at their sides, faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats that carried the weight of lawless men. Killers bred by a land that gave no mercy. They slowed as they neared the cabin, their eyes fixed with cold suspicion. And one of them, broad-shouldered, scar cut across his cheek, spat into the dirt and growled, loud enough for Samuel to hear through the thin wood, "Reckon the little squaw's dead by now. Ain't nobody fool enough to cut her down." Samuel's jaw clenched as anger burned in his chest, for in that single cruel sentence he understood the girl's torment had been deliberate, meant as punishment or warning, and his uncle's name, Elijah Hartley, dripped from their tongues next. Carried in a curse, for the scarred man sneered. Old Elijah left behind more than whiskey debts, left behind trouble too. Now it falls on whoever's fool enough to claim this cursed hole. Samuel realized then that he was not just stepping into land but into a legacy of blood. And these men had come not only for the girl but for him, to bury the Hartley name with one more body under the desert dirt. The boards of the porch groaned as they dismounted, boots crunching against the dry earth, and Samuel's pulse hammered as he stepped back from the window, calculating his chances, 3 against 1, him with only a revolver and them with rifles. But the girl lying behind him gave him a reason stronger than fear, a reason to fight. He crouched low, his thumb easing the hammer back, his breath shallow as the doorknob rattled, and then with a violent kick the door burst open, shadows spilling in with dust and steel, and Samuel fired. The first shot cracked like thunder, tearing through the chest of the lead rider before the man could raise his rifle, and he fell backward with a guttural cry, blood spraying across the porch. But the other 2 dove to either side, bullets ripping through the cabin walls as splinters exploded around Samuel's face. He grabbed the girl with one arm, dragging her behind the old stove for cover as slugs thudded into the wood, his heart racing as he muttered, "Stay with me. Don't give up now." The girl's hand weakly gripped his sleeve, her dark eyes flashing with something fierce, something that told Samuel she had seen worse than this, survived worse than this, and he knew then she carried a story bound to his own fate. The shooting stopped for a breath, silence hanging like a blade. Then a voice growled outside, "Hartley! We know you're in there. Best come out before we burn that place down with both of you inside." Samuel's teeth clenched, sweat dripping down his brow as he whispered a prayer, then shouted back, "This land's mine now, and I ain't running from the devils that haunt it. If you want me, come and take me." The men cursed, boots shifting against the dirt as they moved for position. But Samuel used the pause to reload, his fingers steady now, no longer trembling, for something deeper had awoken inside him. The blood of Elijah Hartley, cursed or not, ran through his veins, and he would not let the West claim him so easily. The girl tugged his arm faintly, her lips parting to whisper in a broken voice, "They killed my family because of him." Her words struck Samuel like a hammer, and he realized the noose around her neck had been vengeance, not random cruelty. His uncle had wronged her people, brought slaughter to the Apache, and she had been left here as a symbol of revenge against the Hartley name. Samuel felt the weight of that guilt, though it was not his sin, and yet in her eyes he saw no hatred for him, only a plea: end this cycle before it consumed them both. The gunfight that followed was savage and unrelenting, bullets tearing through the cabin as Samuel fired back, taking down the second rider with a shot that ripped through the doorway, leaving the last man cursing as he stumbled for cover. The night crackled with smoke and fury until finally silence fell, broken only by the labored breathing of the last outlaw dragging himself away into the brush, swearing vengeance with every step. Samuel didn't chase. He had no strength left for it, and the girl needed him more than his pride did. He pressed a hand to her brow, whispering, "You're safe, I swear it," though even as he said it, he knew safety was a lie in a land where every shadow carried a ghost. He spent the long night tending her wounds, listening to her broken whispers of betrayal, massacres, and a Hartley uncle who had struck deals with both soldiers and outlaws, selling Apache women like cattle, leaving blood debts unpaid, debts that had now fallen upon Samuel's shoulders. By dawn the horizon glowed red, and Samuel Hartley knew his life would never again be the same, for he carried not only a cabin of death but the responsibility of a girl whose survival tied their fates together. And though the West would send more riders, more vengeance, more blood, he felt a fire inside him, a vow that he would not run, would not bow, but would face the curse head-on. He lifted the girl into the saddle, mounted his horse, and turned toward the rising sun with eyes hard as iron, whispering to himself, "If Elijah left me a curse, then I'll turn it into redemption." And as the hooves carried them away from the deadly cabin, the land itself seemed to watch, waiting, for the story of Samuel Hartley and the Apache girl had only just begun. And if you've been gripped by this tale, if your heart raced through the gunfire and your soul stirred with the weight of mercy and vengeance, then make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because the next chapter of this Wild West story will take you deeper into a world where every choice can mean death. Every shadow hides a ghost, and only those with courage in their blood can survive.